Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here on WUSA 9 Plus ahead of the sentencing for Juliana Perez Magalhães. She is the Banfield family au pair who is, facing up to 10 years for what she took as a plea agreement. I'm Katie Lasso. This is Frank Salvedo, a criminal defense attorney, our legal expert here with us today. He's going to be taking all of the questions you may have as we wait for sentencing to begin for Juliana Perez Magalhães. That's going to start at 11:30 this morning. I do want to start by saying thank you so much for being here. We know a lot of you have been here through Brendan-Banfield's trial and are joining us here again for sentencing. If you do have questions for Frank, you can text us at 202-895-5599, and I do see so many questions already coming in from all of you, so we're going to get to those questions as quickly as possible. In about 20 minutes from now is when sentencing is expected to start. Frank, let's talk a little bit about how we got here, though. So Juliana Perez Magalhães, she accepted a plea agreement. Part of her plea agreement included her agreeing to testify against Brendan Banfield during his trial. Now, we know he was convicted on all 4 of the charges that he was tried for. He is convicted on 2 counts of aggravated murder, a child endangerment charge, as well as use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Juliana, though, she today is facing a possible max sentence of 10 years, but part of her plea agreement included that she could get time served. So let's talk about this a little bit. I know the number one question on everyone's mind today is, what sentence is she going to get today? We've talked a lot about this plea agreement, which we have right here. Is there a world in which she gets that max sentence of 10 years, even though she was told she would get time served?
Yeah, there's definitely a world in which she could get more than time served. Under the language of the plea agreement, the Commonwealth has agreed to recommend a sentence of time served. Ultimately, it's up to the judge. That's why the judge is in the black robe and sits higher than everybody else, and she makes the ultimate decision. So is there a world where she could get more than the recommended sentence? Certainly there's a world where that could happen.
All right, and we will know the answer to that in less than 20 minutes from right now. Again, sentencing, for those of you joining us right now, will begin at 11:30 this morning, but we're going to break down some of what has happened already, what happened during Brendan's trial. Let's start, though, by talking about Juliana's testimony. Again, part of her plea agreement required her to testify against Brendan Banfield, and she was called to the stand very early on. We do have some highlights of her testimony, so I'd love to play that for you if we can.
Channel 911, where's your emergency?
I need help. My friend, she just was stuck in the knife now. She's bleeding a lot. I don't know what to do anymore.
He went inside, and then he went upstairs first, and then I went to see what's going on, and I heard I don't know what. I don't know what he was doing. It's spanking her. I don't know.
You heard what?
It's spanking her. I heard, I don't know what was that. And Brendan said, police dropped the knife, because he had a knife. And then he said, drop the gun to Brendan. They were yelling. I couldn't understand. We were super fast.
This case under penalty of law.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I told the detectives that day it was the version Brendan had told me. If I was ever to talk to a lawyer, or this is ever going to happen, like this is what happened. The version I told the detectives that day, and that I eventually also told his lawyer. When I got to the bedroom, Brendan said, he yelled, police officer, and she yelled back at Brendan, saying, Brendan, he has a knife. That's when Brendan first shot Joe. He got on top of her, and that's when I first saw him stab her with a knife. And I just start telling him, he's moving, he's behind you, and that's when I fired the shot too.
Did you see him interacting with Joe or Christine after you shot Joe?
Well, he was still stabbing Christine, and he got her blood, a handful of blood, and starts dripping on Joe's body.
You asking the ladies and gentlemen of the jury to believe that you came out during that time frame because you wanted the truth to be known versus any time the year before that?
Well, the fact that I took a year to accept my plea, it does not mean that I didn't have any intention to tell the truth before. I had a video call with the producer who works with Netflix, and they want to make a movie or documentary about my case, and he explained in terms of compensation. So they were thinking about $10,000, but I want to negotiate. I want more than this.
You were charged with murder because you shot someone. Am I wrong?
No, you're not.
And so why would you deserve something because of that?
Not because of that. I didn't say that I deserved something because of
Okay.
what I did.
I didn't hear any details, so feel free to tell me why.
I'm saying for after, when this is over, for me and my family. And again, for everything we've been through.
All right, so what you just heard was Juliana Perez-Magalhães testifying during Brendan Banfield's trial. That was very early on in the trial. This trial lasted 3 weeks, 4 if you count the verdict, which came on February 2nd for Brendan Banfield. And we heard from Juliana pretty early on. She testified for 2 days. That was really the condensed version of her testimony. But I think even through that, we learned a lot about her, and obviously that her story changed. She claims it changed because Brendan told her that initial story she told, that was the plan. That was what he told her to say, and then what she testified to, she claims that was the truth. Let's go back to the question on everyone's mind. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Katie Lusso. This is Frank Salvedo, a criminal defense attorney. He's also been our legal expert through the Brendan Banfield murder trial, and now has been weighing in with us on what we are going to be seeing in the next 15 minutes or so when Juliana Perez-Magalhães is sentenced. She took this plea agreement. The question on everyone's mind is, will she get time served as recommended by the prosecution in this plea agreement, or will she get the max sentence of 10 years? What is the short answer here?
The short answer is that there are all types of ways to recommend a sentence. The prosecutor could stand up and say bluntly, Judge, we recommend time served, and that's consistent with our terms of the agreement, and then they could sit down. They could alternatively stand up and say, we're recommending time served, Judge, and here are the reasons why. She was an excellent witness for us. We would not have secured a conviction without her cooperation. We stand by our recommendation, and this is why. So there's all types of ways to recommend a sentence. It'll be interesting to see what the Commonwealth's position is and kind of what the vibe is in terms of their recommendation. The bottom line is the judge is going to look at everything here. This sentencing is really on the heels of an aggravated murder conviction. It's very soon after. It's February 2nd to now February 13th. Certainly there's a lot of attention on this case. So the bottom line is the judge is going to look at kind of the egregious nature of what happened here. By her own admission, she shot a man who had already been Mr. Ryan, who's really completely innocent in this entire situation. Right. So does the judge look at that and say, you know what, you shot someone and ended their life? Time served is not enough. I'm thinking the judge is probably going to take a holistic view of this case. She will understand the Commonwealth's recommendations and the reasons underpinning it, but it would not surprise me if she says, despite that recommendation, I'm still the judge and I'm going to give her a substantially higher sentence.
And you know, we heard from the prosecution, we heard from prosecutor Jenna Sands right after Brendan Banfield was convicted on the charges he was convicted on. I would love for us to take a listen to what she talked about when she was asked if this was kind of a sweetheart deal. We heard that come up over and over. Was this a sweetheart deal that was offered to Juliana? So let's take a listen to what Jenna Sands said in response to that.
So I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a sweetheart deal. She does face 10 years in prison. That has not yet been determined. It is obviously a reduction, and it is certainly reflective of her cooperation. But in order to encourage her to tell the truth, there had to be something. I think that the agreement that she entered into will hopefully allow for the judge to pass judgment on her in a way that is measurable. It will certainly never account for the lives that she was responsible for taking, but I think that the amount of time that she'll serve will be determined by Judge Ascarati, and I'm sure it will be appropriate.
All right, so hearing that, Frank, and we've been hearing rumblings that she's going to go in there and there may be some sort of loophole in this plea agreement that she's going to go in there and potentially ask the judge to give a higher sentence. Obviously, we know there's going to be at least one victim impact statement, and that's going to be coming from Joseph Ryan's mother, Deirdre Fisher. I actually spoke to Judge Ascarati, Penny Ascarati, yesterday, and I was trying to get a gauge from her on whether, what is the impact victim impact statements have on her final decision. Obviously, she's not talking about this case because there's so many complications here. She simply can't. But, in your opinion, how much do those statements weigh on the decision? How much does what Jenna Sands said weigh on that decision?
Well, a couple things. Looking at the plea agreement, it looks like Ms. Magalhães has fulfilled her obligation here. She continued to cooperate. So it looks like she's fulfilled her obligation. In terms of any potential loophole, certainly the judge has the power to do whatever the judge wants to do. So that is really the only potential loophole. I don't see a way that the Commonwealth can say that she hasn't continued to cooperate. So again, it's interesting to see what Judge Ascarati is going to do. I think par for the course, she wasn't going to say anything or preview anything. She has very high ethical standards that way. In terms of the victim impact statement, that will have a great significant influence on what the decision is. When you have a person standing in front of you talking about their loss, and we can't forget the humanity in this case, the loss of a human life, 2 lives here, and speaking directly to a judge face to face, eye to eye, that has a huge impact. It's not just a letter, it's just not a submission, it's not a proffer by the parties, it's an actual live person talking as one human being to another. It will have a significant impact, I think.
All right, let's talk more about that. So we do know that one of the victim impact statements is going to be coming from Deirdre Fisher, and that is Joseph Ryan's mother. I was able to speak with her, as you know, prior to the trial starting. She was down in Orlando, in Florida, and we were able to sit down and talk about her son because, her son has really been painted in a negative light here, and it's important to remember Joseph Ryan is a victim, Christine Banfield a victim. There are 2 victims here who were senselessly murdered, and Brendan Banfield has now been convicted. Today, Juliana will be testified. She's being sentenced for Christine's death, but she still has admitted she played a role in all of this, which led to Joseph Ryan's death. I'd love, if we can, to play a clip from when I spoke with Deirdre Fisher, and I asked her the question, is there a world in which you forgive the person who killed your son? Let's take a listen to that.
Is there a world in which you forgive the person who took your son?
Never. They don't deserve it. It's not necessary for me to move on. I'm not carrying this. I will carry my son's life forever, and I miss him. But I don't forgive them. It's unforgivable what they did. They didn't care. They threw away his life. They murdered Christine. They didn't care about that little girl. There are very few murderers worse than these 2 people. What they did is beyond horrendous, and they did it not because they loved each other. It's not some romantic notion of killing somebody so you can be together. This was a man who killed his wife and my son for some kind of thrill. It had nothing to do with any other thing. There was no love between these 2 people. They had a sick, psychopathic relationship. Juliana wanted to live in this country and take over another woman's life. It's as simple as that. So, no, I'll never forgive them. Never. And I'll never wish a moment of peace on their life. And guess what? I'll go on. I'll be fine. I won't be resentful. I'll live a life. And I'll live a life that is happy because my son wanted that for me. And so that's what I'll do. But no forgiveness for them.
Okay, so that was Deirdre Fisher, Joseph Ryan's mother. I spoke to her this morning again before we came out here just to check in with her, see how she's doing. This has obviously been a lot on her, and she is getting ready right now to prepare to give her victim impact statement. She is doing it virtually, but there's a lot of pressure here. She knows she has a huge responsibility here, and she wants to make sure her son gets justice. And in her mind, part of that justice includes potentially getting a larger sentence for Juliana Perez-Magalhães. One of the other questions that keeps coming up is the question of deportation, and we know that obviously Juliana will be sent back to Brazil if she is released. Is there any complication there? If she is released, given time served, would she be walked out the door today, picked up by ICE and deported? How would that work?
I think there's a limited time that ICE has to pick her up. I would expect the deportation to be pretty quick in this case. If she's able to, walk out the door or get a time-served sentence. Usually you're sent to a holding facility, like an immigration holding facility that we've heard a lot about. But given the nature of the conviction, obviously it's beyond horrible and it's beyond an aggravated felony, which is all they would need to prove anyway. She'll be sent to a location which houses folks that are about to be deported.
Okay.
I would expect that she would be deported very quickly, within 30 days.
Okay. All right, so we will have to wait and see. Again, sentencing starting in less than 5 minutes now. Let's talk about the layout real quick. We know we're going to hear potentially at least one victim impact statement. How long do you think this is going to go on?
I would say it'll probably go on for 45 minutes or so, would be my guess.
Okay.
There looks like there was a preparation of a pre-sentence report in this case. The judge will come out and ask the parties whether they have any additions or corrections to the pre-sentence report. They will, the parties will then have an opportunity to address the court in terms of any argument to the court. That's when the recommendation angle will be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
And then Ms. Magalhães will have also an opportunity to address the court, and be interesting to see what she says in terms of her remorse.
Okay.
As your viewers have seen, and as we've seen over the past few weeks, her attitude has sometimes been less than exemplary. I would phrase it as kind of petulant at times during the cross-examination. So we'll see what kind of tone that she reaches, and then you'll have your victim impact statement also during the course of that will be done, and then it'll be up to the judge to announce sentence. I fully expect the judge has in mind what she's going to do already. She's very thorough. She's reviewed all the paperwork in the pre-sentence report. Sometimes the argument can sway a judge. Sometimes that in-person argument can sway a judge. But I think she probably already has in mind what she's going to do. She may tinker with it here or there.
Okay.
But it'll take about 45 minutes. It'll be really emotional, it'll be difficult, but I don't think it's going to take a long amount of time, given the fact that she probably has in mind already what she's thinking of doing.
Okay. We talked a little bit, Frank, about Joseph Ryan. I would like to talk about Christine Banfield. She's the other victim here, right? There's two victims, Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. Juliana is accused of firing the fatal shot at Joseph Ryan. But this on your screen, this is Christine Banfield. A little about her. She was a nurse. She was a mother to a 4-year-old girl at that time. Right now, that little girl is 8.5 years old, I believe, from what we heard with the testimony. And right now, that little girl doesn't have her mother because her mother was murdered. And now her father is facing a life sentence, convicted of killing her and Joseph Ryan. We were able to connect with Christine Banfield's family. Our Matthew Torres was able to connect with them, as they have been in the courtroom through this entire trial for Brendan Banfield. I'd like to read you some of the statement they shared with us here at WUSA 9. Let's start with when they talk about Christine. They called her honest. They said she's faithful, caring, compassionate, a helpful person who is dedicated to her family, friends, and patients. They also talked about how the lies, as they called them, told about her after her murder were just as painful as her death. And the family said they're committed to ensuring that Christine will always be remembered as the beautiful person she was to everyone that loved her. They talk a lot about those lies, and we heard so much coming out of Brendan Banfield's mouth talking about his wife in such a negative way, the woman that he claimed he did not kill. He talked about how she had affairs, but there was no evidence ever shared that she ever had an affair. And you know, this is the mother of his little girl as well. So really heartbreaking stuff. Will we hear from Christine's family? It's a little unclear right now. We know one of her family members did want to give a victim impact statement, so we might hear from one of her family members. I do want to also mention that Christine's family, just like Joseph Ryan's mother, she made a comment about how she wishes nothing but the best for Christine's family and feels so terribly for them. Christine's family also had this to say about Joseph Ryan's family. They said, "Our sympathy is with Joe Ryan's family as we understand the loss and grief that they are experiencing. He, like Christine, was an innocent victim." So we've heard from both families now. Will we hear from both families in just a few moments? Possibly, definitely Joseph Ryan's family. I think we will hear in some capacity from Christine Banfield's family. But you know, sentencing set to begin at 11:30. I expect we will see Judge Penny Ascarati up there momentarily. You know, any advice for people who are watching this right now, Frank?
It's going to be tough. As we've talked about, Katie, over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, this is a senseless, terrible situation in a lot of ways. I think legally what I'm looking at is kind of the presentations of the lawyers, the recommendation by the Commonwealth, how that recommendation is put forth, the arguments of the defense counsel, and also kind of how Ms. Magalhães presents herself to the court. Does she tone down kind of her little bit confrontational and like how does she present herself? And ultimately what the judge's rationale is if she doesn't follow the recommendation, what her rationale is for imposing a higher sentence.
Okay.
We've lost, you know, 2 human beings, and it's going to be a difficult situation. It's going to be a tough sentencing.
Okay. I do see Judge Penny Ascarati up there on the stand. I do want to mention just real quickly before we go into the courtroom, it looks like they're about to start, but somebody asked if the family for Christine Banfield is in there, if Joseph Ryan's family. We do know family members for both of the victims are there. As you see though on the screen, it does look like Deirdre Fisher is preparing to potentially give that victim impact statement. I did see her there momentarily, or a few moments ago. So why don't we actually take a listen into what is going on right now in the courtroom as sentencing is set to begin any moment now for Juliana Perez Magalhães.
About another case that includes, or I'm sorry, another exhibit that includes personal information. So the exhibits, the defense exhibits we would ask to seal are 120,
right,
121,
okay,
122, and 123.
Right, and that has protected patent information, is that correct?
Protected health information or protected personal information.
Okay. All right, okay, so I got you. All right, any objections?
No objection, Judge.
All right, we'll go ahead and seal those for, I assume there's many patient information in there, is that what it is?
There, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 120, 121, 122, and 123, correct?
Yes.
All right, I'll grant your motion. That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. All right, Commonwealth versus Magalhães.
Morning, Ryan Campbell, President.
Good morning, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you.
All right, the case of Commonwealth of Virginia versus Juliana Perez Magalhães. Ms. Perez Magalhães is present in the courtroom with her attorney. The Commonwealth is present. Comes today for sentencing. Are we ready to go forward today, Mr. Campbell?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, have you reviewed the pre-sentence investigation report with your client?
We did, Your Honor. No changes, additions, or corrections.
All right, does the Commonwealth have any?
No changes, additions, or corrections.
All right, I'll make the pre-sentence investigation report part of the record. The Commonwealth, as far as evidence, I do have victim impact statements that I have already reviewed. Is there any objection to those victim impact statements?
Your Honor, my position, I talked to the Commonwealth, is that some of them fall outside the definition under.
Okay, which ones? Or are you objecting to certain ones, or are you not?
Your Honor, the specific ones are the ones that relate to Christine Banfield, so the
Okay.
family members of Christine.
So you object to those victim impact statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And Judge, what I would say to that is that certainly the statement of facts that we presented and that is included in the pre-sentence report includes information about also the murder of Christine Banfield. I understand that this charge itself reflects the killing and the murder of Joseph Ryan. However, I do think that the voices of Christine Banfield's family are important in this hearing as well.
I understand, but he's only been charged with the murder. I mean, she's only been charged with the murder of Joseph Ryan. So the only victim impact statements the court can consider are the ones based on which the Commonwealth has charged her with. So I can only take into consideration the victim impact statements from Joseph Ryan's family.
Understood,
Okay,
Your Honor.
so I'll do that and I'll grant your motion. Okay? All right, do you have any other evidence?
Judge, I do. In light of the court's ruling, I'm going to have 2 witnesses to call. The first of which is going to be Deirdre Fisher.
Okay, Deirdre Fisher.
She is appearing via Teams.
All right. Okay, ma'am, if you could just raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth under penalty of law?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, Ms. Fisher.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name for the court?
My name is Deirdre Maureen Fisher.
And can you tell the court your relationship to Joe Ryan?
Joseph Ryan is my son.
And can you tell the court of any psychological injury that you have received resulting from this offense, or any changes to your personal welfare, lifestyle, or relationships resulting from this offense?
Is this outside of the statement that I
No, ma'am.
am going to read?
You go ahead and read your statement.
Oh, so I read it now?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Honorable Judge Penny S. Ascaretti, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the impact of the murder of my son, Joseph Nathan Ryan. My baby boy was born 2 days before Christmas, making that our special holiday. His middle name was Nathan, which means gift. Since Joe's murder, I haven't been able to take down my little Christmas tree, which sits behind the urn with his ashes. I say good morning to him each day when I turn on the tree's lights. But of course, that's not Joe sitting there. He can't say, I love you back. When Joe was taken from me cruelly and callously, murdered by Juliana and Brendan on February 24th, 2023, I lost so very much, more than I can possibly name. I lost my confidant, someone who knew me deeply, listened without judgment, offered advice with my best interests at heart. I lost my biggest ally and my cheerleader. That empathetic voice saying, Mom, you got this. Mom, you should be kinder to yourself. I lost my rock and protector. The person who flew down repeatedly to take care of me when I had cancer. I lost the comfort of knowing that my son would be there to care for me when I'm an old woman with illness or dementia, just as he cared for his grandmother and grandfather. I lost my financial sustainability due to grief's torturous effect on my health, both physically and mentally, which has affected my ability to work and function. I lost my peace and sense of well-being. I can never unhear Joe's moans and cries after he was shot, the cries of a dying man. I can never unsee the image of his lifeless, bloody hand from the trial images. I lost nearly all my friends who couldn't handle dealing with someone lost in grief or understand why my life can't just go on. I lost the chance to ever be called grandma. I will never have that. I lost the sound of Joe calling me the most beautiful word in the world, Mom. I lost my Christmas baby, Joseph Nathan, my greatest gift. The impact of Joe's loss doesn't go away. Will never go away, but only grow. So many tears, so many times reaching for the phone to call him, only to remember that he won't and can't pick up. So many times hearing the phone ring and wishing it was him, calling me out of the blue about something happening in the world or in his life. So many empty Christmases and so many birthdays without him singing to me in his awful yet beautiful voice, tone deaf. So many moments of trying to remember the exact sound of his laughter and fearing that someday I won't. So many sleepless nights. So many nightmares of his brutal murder and fear, confusion, and of the pain he must have felt. So many screams and guttural cries into my pillow, feeling the loss of my son. So many moments of reading horrible, so many moments defending and explaining who my son was and why he couldn't have committed the murder of Christine Banfield. God rest her soul. So many conversations with others, draining them and me of a chance to make happier memories together. So many stomach aches. So many doctor's appointments, hospital bills, feelings of shame about my health. So many times wishing I could tell Joe about another milestone in my weight loss journey, seeking better health, knowing how encouraging and proud he would be. So many lost moments, so many moments of loss. My son's life was used and thrown away, seen as worthless and utterly disposable. Disposal by those who plotted and executed his brutal murder. Do I think or dare hope that there will be justice for Joe's death? For my loss as his mother? I don't believe that's possible. What I do hope is that even for a moment, that the world and you, Judge, will say Joe meant more than nothing, that he was someone worthy of dignity and life, who didn't deserve to be used and thrown away, treated as utterly disposable. Thank you for listening and for weighing the trail of pain and loss Juliana left in the wake of her calculated, cold-blooded murder, with her life and future as her only concern. My son, Joseph Nathan Ryan, was not and is not disposable. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Please answer any questions that Mr. Campbell may have.
All right, cross-examination? No cross-examination. Okay, thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you.
All right, your next witness?
Judge, the next witness that I have is going to be Ms. Sangeeta Ryan, who is present in court.
Okay, Ms. Ryan?
Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case under penalty of law? I do. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name for the court?
Sangeeta Ryan.
And can you describe your relationship to Joe Ryan?
Is this where I read my statement? Who I met, Joey Nathan Ryan, was my nephew. And Honorable Judge Ascarati, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you for allowing the Ryan family to speak up for our Joey Nathan Ryan. We thank the jury for helping us achieve justice for Joe and Christine. And we thank the Fairfax County Police Department, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and all that helped, and we are grateful for justice. So our family has remained silent since the devastating loss out of grief, but also out of respect for the justice system. For us, Joe did not just die on February 23rd, 23. He was murdered over and over again, every time lies were spoken, every time his picture was posted alongside salacious stories told by two wolves in sheep's clothing who perpetrated this crime and attempted to destroy the memory of two remarkable people. Julia and her boss/lover intended to snuff out the life of two innocent victims who deserve to live full and meaningful lives of their own. Well, while we acknowledge the defendant for eventually coming forward with the truth, telling the truth doesn't absolve her of responsibility. Honesty is something we're taught at a young age. Telling the truth doesn't erase the harm. It simply allows others to move forward. It doesn't bring Joe back, and it sure doesn't bring Christine back. Hearing the truth has finally allowed us to exhale. It validated to the world what we already knew, that Joe was not the monster he was portrayed to be. Rather, Joe is an elder brother, a brand new uncle, the eldest cousin and confidant to four. He is my beloved nephew and a son and grandson to his loving family. Pardon me 1 second. We acknowledge that Juliana was a young woman in a foreign country, in love with her employer in a situation where the power imbalance was not in her favor. But where our compassion ends is with the one other responsibility. Juliana was entrusted with and received payment for the care and protection of a small, innocent child. And Juliana, I feel, failed Valerie repeatedly. She was trusted to protect this young charge, but instead chose to cause irreparable damage. She robbed her of her mother. She stole childhood memories. She chose to partner in the brutal assassination of her mother's character, as well as her beautiful being. The defendant and her boss/boyfriend convinced Valerie that a stranger broke into her home and killed her mother, when in fact the monsters were the very people who cared for her after the loss. Julia and her boss worked to erase her mother's existence and credibility and place the blame on an innocent man. Our hearts go out to all of Christine and Valerie's family. What an absolutely incredible person she must have been. But may I tell you about Joe? Joe is loved. Joe came to live with the Ryan family. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Take your time.
Joe came to live with the Ryan family just days after his birth. His birth parents, Dad, Sean, and Deirdre, who you met, were teenagers, so Joe lived with and was raised by his paternal grandparents, Connie and Jim, for all of his life. As a young child, Joe, who we call Joey, was fun-loving and loved from the beginning. He was inquisitive, curious, smart, charming, and so dang talkative. Joe approached strangers and passerbyers with random and nerdy questions about Transformers and movie characters and the Legend of Zelda video game characters and who would win in a battle between this person, and he respectfully waited the answers, whether you knew them or not. As he grew into adulthood, Joe's hobbies included building or painting anything that used his fine motor skills. He loved martial arts. He had a great love and respect for our environment, animals, especially mistreated, neglected, and ugly dogs. And he rescued many injured and less loved dogs, bringing them across the country in his travels safely home to the home he shared with his grandmother. Joe cared for people, he cared for animals, and Joe didn't hurt people. When Joe's grandfather, Pap, required care due to a debilitating stroke, Joe left his life in Virginia and moved to Florida to serve as the full-time caregiver to his grandfather, the grandfather that supported him from infancy. When Pap developed dementia and had to move into a memory care facility, then Joe moved back to Virginia where he began to take care of his grandmother, who had begun to experience health problems of her own. Joe took over transportation for medical appointments, hospital procedures, food shopping, and the bond between Connie and her grandson was as close as that of a mother and child. Joe would never have put himself in a dangerous situation that would risk his ability to continue to take care of his beloved grandmother or his old ugly dog, Kitty. I'm sorry, she's not ugly. When Joe didn't come home, Joe's grandmother, Connie, lost the gentleman that she and Pap raised as their fourth son. Joe's sudden murder devastated his grandma, who was 81, and devastated her so much she could no longer live in the family home without Joe, and quietly and quickly sold her home to dodge memories, grief, and reporters to move closer to my husband and me. My husband is Joe's Uncle Jimmy, and I'm his Aunt Gita. In Joe's absence, my husband and I made the decision to leave our careers and to take over his grandma's support and care team. We continue to do that today, and we think about and talk about Joe every single day. Honorable Judge Asgarati, we feel Joe and Christine were targeted by the worst kind of monsters, the kind who live among the victims and wait until they're the most vulnerable. We feel as a woman, a caretaker, and as a daughter, Juliana had opportunity to stop this brutal assassination. We think she could have warned Christine. We think she could have warned Joe that morning. This could have been a very different ending where Juliana saved 2 lives. But that's not. At least she should have done the job for which she was being paid to protect a child. She did not. So many opportunities to do the right thing, and Juliana over and over chose not to. And while we acknowledge that she found the strength to tell the truth, it doesn't absolve the responsibility. So today we leave here finally standing as Joe. This nightmare's ending. It's our hope that Juliana doesn't walk free, but continues to reflect on how she became capable of doing this, so that when she does return to Brazil, she never victimizes another person, never betrays another child in her care, and never again places selfish desire above human life. She doesn't deserve to profit. We hope that can be enforced. The reality is, though, she will be free one day, and our hope is that she carries the weight of the lives destroyed, that Juliana chooses to live as a decent person, and that she is truly remorseful. The sentence that Juliana receives today is not the only one given. We all carry a life sentence of grief, even after hers ends. We ask for peace. We ask to be allowed to move forward. Today we move forward by returning Joe's kindness to the world. We say his name proudly. We invite the world to finally know the man we protected in silence for so long. He is loved. We miss Joe, and our family is devastated by the way he was ripped from our lives. Joe won't complete painting his unfinished Warhammer 3D figurines. He won't compete in any more live-action role-playing battles with silly, hand-created foam weapons, nor his mixed martial arts or video game battles. He'll no longer bore us with lectures about eating organic food over junk food, but it's with our hearts we thank you, Honorable Judge, and the jury that was here, members of the court, the police, the detective, the prosecution team, the victims team, and all the witnesses who supported justice for Joe. Thank you so much for listening.
Please answer any questions that Mr. Campbell might have.
Any cross-examination?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, no questions. All right, you can
Thank
go
you
back
so
to your seat.
much.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
Judge, I don't have any further evidence, but I do want to acknowledge to the court that the family of Christine Banfield is here today. You can see them to your honor's right.
All right, thank you. Thank you,
Along
ma'am.
with Joe's family. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Commonwealth's arrest for evidence. For the defense residents, I do have for your evidence the memorandum of support of sentencing, which I have reviewed. In addition, 3 letters that you have provided
Yes, Your
as
Honor.
well. I reviewed those as well.
Your Honor, I'm going to hand up a few certificates that Mr. President, they can just be made part of the record there.
Okay. Are
And
these
no
okay
further
to be,
evidence.
can be part of the file, or do you need copies? We can make copies of them if you'd like.
That'd be fine, Your Honor.
Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
make copies. All right, let me just review them, please. All right, we'll go ahead and make copies of these certificates and make them part of the records as well. All right, any other evidence from the defense?
No further evidence, Your
All right, argument?
Judge, the Commonwealth in this case, as the court is aware, made a recommendation, and the Commonwealth stands by that recommendation.
All right, argument, Mr. Campbell?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the 2 witnesses that you heard from today made it clear that hearing the truth was valuable to them, to the Ryan family, and it was the truth that Juliana spoke at trial. And ultimately, it was her testimony that likely resulted in the conviction of Brendan-Banfield. Until her cooperation, the Commonwealth had only a theory. They had circumstantial evidence, but no direct evidence. When Juliana finally came forward, she offered that direct evidence of what crimes she'd been involved in and what crimes were committed by Brendan-Banfield. Your Honor, our position is that justice requires that the court follow the joint recommendation of the parties. Justice requires it because it was an arm's-length agreement made by an experienced prosecution team with the approval of the head of the office, with the knowledge of all the facts and circumstances of the case, not just the facts of the case, but issues that would be presented at trial, the presentation of evidence and witnesses, sentencing guidelines, and many other factors that the parties consider beyond what the court might realize. Justice requires it because Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield and their families deserve justice. By accepting responsibility in this case and cooperating, we avoided 2 trials. We assured the finality of the decision in this case, and we gave the jury and the Commonwealth and the court confidence that Brendan-Banfield would be convicted, as he ultimately was. Justice requires following the agreement because every individual that makes...
Following the recommendation.
Recommendation, yes,
Thank
Your
you.
Honor. And I addressed that in my memo, of course.
Yes.
Every individual that makes a difficult decision to cooperate does so with the belief that the recommendation would be followed or at least considered by the court. The Commonwealth, the courts, and prosecutors in courts everywhere in the country rely on cooperating witnesses to do what Juliana has done in this case, which is to speak to the truth and offer direct evidence of crimes, including those cooperating witnesses that they themselves have committed serious offenses. When a prosecutor makes a promise, the court ought to give it serious weight. Your Honor, I'll say I'm disappointed but not surprised that the Commonwealth didn't advocate today for the recommendation. I have deep respect for Ms. Bristler and Ms. Sands and the prosecution team. I suspect that this is frankly because of public sentiment regarding the agreement that they made.
Recommendation.
I'm going to continue to make that mistake.
I
understand. Your Honor, I just want to touch on a few things that I've just reviewed.
Yes, yes.
Your Honor, the importance of the cooperation. Ms. Sands did communicate to me that she interviewed the foreman of the jury, who said three things to them, three things that Ms. Sands relayed to me, that they believed Juliana Perez Magalhães, that her testimony was integral. That was the word that Ms. Sands used. In other words, central to their decision to convict Brendan-Banfield. And third, that they didn't believe Brendan-Banfield. Your Honor, that is important for the court to consider because, again, up until her testimony, which was presented first in the Commonwealth series of witnesses, the Commonwealth had only a theory. The Commonwealth had circumstantial evidence, forensic evidence, electronic forensic evidence, digital forensic evidence, and others. But it was Juliana who ultimately told the story firsthand of what occurred. Because that decision was integral in the jury's decision, I think it could be said, and of course the court presided over the entire trial, you can determine her credibility yourself, but the jury certainly found it integral to their decision. And for that reason, the Commonwealth's recommendation, the joint recommendation, should be given heavy consideration by the court in this case. Your Honor, I briefly want to just touch on the delay in cooperating. It was evident to the defense that from Juliana's first date of arrest that they wanted her cooperation desperately. Her cooperation didn't come quickly. And our position is that at that time, she was still under the grip of Brendan-Banfield, and the plan that he had convinced her would work. She still believed that there wouldn't be sufficient evidence for a conviction, and she was relying on Brendan's plan to get her through her arrest and prosecution. As she languished in jail, discovery dripped in. We really didn't receive significant discovery until after the preliminary hearing in this case. And even leading up to the trial date, we still hadn't received much of the digital forensic evidence that was made central to Brendan-Banfield's case. Your Honor, the tipping point was perhaps the arrest of Brendan-Banfield. That broke his grip on Juliana. The communications between Brendan and Juliana ceased. There were no further assurances that things would be okay for her, that they would have a life together afterwards. She was left alone, truly alone. No communications from his mother or family or other people, and no ability for her to actually contact her own family. She was left alone upon Brendan's arrest, and that was a huge factor in her coming forward. Your Honor, when she did come forward, we moved rapidly. We had a lengthy debrief followed by a plea within a day or two of that debrief. The next several months resulted in continued debriefings. We were available at every request of the Commonwealth. She continued to be candid and open with her statements, and I haven't heard any issues with her reluctance to answer questions in those debrief sessions. Your Honor, if she hadn't testified, there's a good chance that Brendan wouldn't have been convicted. First, the Commonwealth believed her. Secondly, Brendan chose to testify himself. I doubt he would have done that without her testimony. He chose to directly challenge her statement of offense, of her account of what occurred, and he was caught in his own lies. Beginning with shortly after cross-examination, the question of whether he loved her or not, and him saying, well, I didn't really love her. There were certain things that were in the way. And finally ending with his testimony about an important meeting that he was going to. Upon reviewing that testimony, his boss came forward and testified the next day that there was no meeting. Brendan's lies ultimately resulted in his conviction, but he might not have testified if Juliana hadn't been testified. Your Honor, I appreciate the comments of Joseph Ryan's family, and I've read the letters that were filed by Christine's family, and there's no words I can offer to console them at this time. But it is critical that there was no trial in this case, that there is finality for the families, and that there was cooperation by Juliana that resulted in Brendan's conviction. Your Honor, the last thing I want to comment on is the agreement in this case, the recommendation.
Thank you.
I had hoped the language of the plea agreement says that the Commonwealth recommends. It doesn't say they have to get up and advocate or pound their fist. and argue to what extent the cooperation was important. But the court can weigh that yourself. It was critical. Her cooperation and testimony was critical to the outcome of Brendan Banfield's case. This was an agreement for a recommendation that was made with full knowledge of what the facts were of the case and what public sentiment might be regarding the agreement for Juliana in this case. The agreement was made anyway.
Recommendation.
Thank
you.
The recommendation was made with the input of all the victims, of the police department, and all the important people as required by law. And there was no pushback at that time, Your Honor. I have a position in my sentencing memo whether this is an agreement or a recommendation under A1, A, or C. I'll maintain that argument, Your Honor. I ask that the court follow the joint recommendation of the parties and impose an active sentence of no more than time served in this case.
All right, thank you, Mr. Campbell. All right, Ms. Perez-Magalhães, if you could stand up, please. If you could stand up, Ms. Perez-Magalhães. Is there anything you wish to say at this time before sentence is imposed?
Yeah, I would like to read a statement. I have caused your pain that cannot be measured and forever changed so many lives. I pray for forgiveness from the Benson family and from Joseph Ryan's family and from Valerie. I will never forgive myself for the pain caused. I hope that my cooperation in this case somehow begin to help repair the damage caused. There is nothing I could possibly do to make it up to you, to your loss. Sorry. There are so many regrets, but this is my biggest. That's it. That's a tragedy I have been carrying with me, and I will always do. It's something I have nightmares with. A tragedy I know I can never take back the devastation of what I have done. I know that my remorse cannot bring you peace. I hope you might someday understand that I truly do not believe that his plan would have actually happened. I have grown so much over the past 3 years. And look back at my younger self at 22 years old, falling head over heels for someone 15 years older. They only seen his good side and clinging to someone that showed me love. I lost myself in a relationship, leaving my morals and values behind, and putting even my loved ones through this. My time in jail has been a time of reflection for me to better myself in more ways than I realized I needed. I had to find myself again. That's when I truly found God, when I had lost the desire to live, when I wanted to die. The guilt and feelings that I didn't deserve to live and that I was a monster were overwhelming. In God, I found the forgiveness and mercy, and I am restored. Jail is not a place you can bear to let yourself drown in those feelings. I wanted to disconnect from my pain and the guilt and get into survival mode to stay mentally sane, because inevitably, with the memories come pain. Yet, I know I will live with this for the rest of my life. God and I only know the shame and guilt and sorrow I carry for all I have caused. Sorry for Joe's family and Christina's family. Sorry for Valerie, an innocent little girl who has so much love that will grow without her mother and now her father. This I have burden to carry, knowing could have prevented it at all from happening. I understand that I am to blame, and I'm truly sorry for the pain it caused. I hope someday I can be forgiven, as I hope to be able to forgive myself. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right. In this matter, the court does find that the manslaughter charge was a large benefit of your bargain for testifying, which was a huge bargain in a plea deal. You could have been facing life plus 3 years, and now the maximum I can sentence you to today is 10 years. That's clearly a trade for your cooperation with the Commonwealth and what the Commonwealth offered. And you accepted that along with the Commonwealth's recommendation for time served, which is not an agreement, and as you know, not binding on the court, as we discussed at length at your plea. The reduction of the charge is a mitigation. I have watched your interviews and I watched you testify, and I just cannot find any further mitigation factors for your case. You may not have come up with a plan, agreed, and an older man may have groomed you to a point, but I want to list for the record the facts that I cannot equate with accepting a time-served recommendation. These are aggravating factors either not fully captured or not reflected in the sentencing guidelines. Number one, until today, you have shown no empathy for the victim in this case. Number two, you were more involved with the plan than you testified to. First off, there were numerous postings on social media platforms and text platforms looking for a target, texting and speaking directly with Joseph Ryan, encouraging him to bring the knife, and ultimately through the phone conversation, getting his consent, knowing all along you were bringing him to his death. Lying to Christine and setting up the plan for the zoo, using her devices and hiding her phone, using a child as a pawn in your plan, waiting outside for Joseph to show up, calling Mr. Banfield to bring him to the scene, and at any point for at least the month prior or that day, you could have stopped this. The plan did not work without your full involvement. Number three, having the loaded firearm in your pocket. Number four, bringing a child into the basement knowing two people were about to be murdered, to include the child's mother. Number five, hearing Christine ask you to call 911, which you did and then immediately hung up. Number six, seeing Joseph Bryan, who was shot in the head at that time, still moving and walking up to him as he lay moaning on the floor and shooting him point blank in the heart. Number seven, watching as Mr. Banfield stabbed Christine over and over again. Number eight, waiting 15 minutes before recalling 911. Number nine, telling a fabricated story for over a year and a half, a story that depicted Joseph Ryan wrongly as a rapist and a murderer, an innocent man. And number 10, telling the child it was okay to call you mommy hours after the murder. Your actions were deliberate, self-serving, and demonstrated a profound disregard for human life. So let's get it straight. You do not deserve anything other than incarceration and a life of reflection on what you have done to the victim and this family. May it weigh heavily on your soul. So today I'm sentencing you on a manslaughter charge because that's what's before me, and the facts of this case demonstrate an intentional and calculated level of violence that is the most serious manslaughter scenario that this court has ever seen. Therefore, I do sentence you to 10 years in the penitentiary, as required by Virginia Code 19.2, 295.2. After you've completed your 10-year sentence, I will order an additional 2 years suspended, and you will be placed on probation pursuant to Virginia Code 19.2, 303. Since you have been convicted of a felony in Virginia, a sample of your DNA will also be drawn for the state police database. Are there any questions, Mr. Campbell? All right, anything further in this case? No, ma'am. Okay. All right, you're remanded to the custody of the sheriff. I believe that completes the docket. Is that correct? I believe so. Okay. Court will be in recess. All rise. Court's in recess.
All right, thank you so much for staying with us here on WUSA 9+. You have been watching the sentencing for Juliana Perez-Magalhães, and she was just sentenced to 10 years. That was the max sentence she could receive on that manslaughter charge. The manslaughter charge she took as part of her plea agreement. I'm Katie Lusso. This is Frank Salvedo, our criminal defense attorney who's been watching this trial for Brendan Banfield, but also, what's been going on with Juliana Perez-Magalhães for us. If you have questions for him, you can text us right now at 202-895-5599. Again, you see that number there on your screen, 202-895-5599. And I know a lot of you have questions. I mean, what we just saw was the Judge Penny Ascarati, not go against in her words. She said this was not an agreement, this was a recommendation, but the recommendation was something that they were expecting to move forward with. The defense attorney, Ryan Campbell, I believe is his name, we heard him say he expected the judge to go along with that plea agreement, but we kind of had an idea that that may not happen. We heard the prosecutor, after Brendan Banfield was convicted, say she deserves the 10 years, and then we heard a lot coming out of Judge Penny Ascarati's mouth. What is your reaction to hearing that 10-year sentence being handed down?
I think a couple of observations. Certainly, this sentencing coming right on the heels of that aggravated murder trial was a tough one for the defense. Just in no particular order, it seems like Judge Ascarati had her reasons kind of already written down, and I think she had reflected on the case. She sat through the entire trial. She looked at the pre-sentence report. She looked at the memorandum submitted by the defense in this case, and I think she had a rationale. I think she made, 9 or 10 points, which she said were not included in the sentencing guidelines, which would be part of the pre-sentence report. So I think having presided over the entire trial, looking at all the documents, I think she came in with an idea of what she was going to do, and I don't think anything that she heard took her away from that idea. I would just parenthetically say that I think Mr. Campbell did a good job in terms of urging the judge to follow the recommendation. It was just a recommendation. It wasn't an agreement. He made a point about that. He did as good a job as you could ever expect to say, listen, Judge, and in fact he said, the jury foreperson said that her testimony was absolutely critical to the conviction. And as we've talked about before, these types of agreements are important because if the parties don't have faith that the judge will follow the recommendation, that is sometimes can be an issue. But obviously this case is an outlier. It's violent, it was terrible, and Ms. Magalhães was involved. I think the judge commented far more than even what she testified to at trial. So I'm not shocked by the sentence. I think the judge was well prepared and gave the rationale for the sentence. The Commonwealth did just say a one-liner in terms of their recommendation, and I think Mr. Campbell indicated that although he didn't expect the Commonwealth to pound her fist on the table, the one-line recommendation may not have been kind of reflective of what he was expecting. So all in all, I don't think it's a surprise given just the kind of the brutality of all the facts.
All right, let's talk about some of the questions we're getting. A lot of them are about this sentence that was just handed down. So again, if you are just tuning in now, we just watched Judge Penny Ascarati sentence Juliana Perez Magalhães to 10 years. But let's talk about that 10-year sentence. I heard her talking about some of the time served, not necessarily time served, but a probation period. How much time, Frank, will she serve in prison for this manslaughter charge?
I think she's been incarcerated for how long? 2 or 3 years now?
Since 2023.
Yeah, so it's 2.5 years or so. You generally do 85% of your time. What she said about probation afterwards and whatnot, I think everybody can kind of disregard that because she's going to be immediately deported. So even though she gets additional suspended time or probation afterwards, that's really just a fallacy. It isn't really going to exist in this case. So she typically would be looking at 8.5 years on a 10-year sentence, and then that 8.5 years will be reduced by whatever time she's already served. So if that's, say, 2.5 years, then she's looking at 6 years still to serve before she gets deported.
You know, we saw her take the stand. We also saw victim impact statements from Deirdre Fisher, Joseph Ryan's mother, as well as Joseph Ryan's aunt. Both of those victim impact statements were incredibly emotional. We had an idea of what Deirdre Fisher was going to say. And, you know, this has been so hard on her. She had to give that statement virtually. She's down in Florida with some health issues. She wasn't able to travel. Do you think those two victim impact statements had an impact on Judge Ascarati?
I think they may have had some impact. First, on a very human level, the victim impact statement by his mom was, and I know you've talked to the mom a lot and have done an excellent job in getting her involved and being able to talk about her son, but that was emotional and terrible, and some of the things that she said about lighting up the Christmas tree and those little vignettes that she told about him were really powerful. Whether that would have moved Judge Ascarati from 8 years to 10 years, you know, nobody will ever know except her. It seemed like she kind of had an idea that because of the brutality of the case that this deserved 10 years. She also said, the judge also said, that the benefit of your deal or your cooperation really came in the reduction of the charge. I thought that was an interesting point where she said kind of like, you've already gotten credit for your cooperation because you're not getting a life sentence.
Right.
You're only getting perhaps a 10-year sentence. So you've already received a huge benefit of your cooperation already. She wasn't willing to take that next leap and follow the joint recommendation.
And again, for people who are just tuning in, thank you so much for joining us on WUSA 9+. We just saw the sentencing of Juliana Perez-Magalhães. She was sentenced to 10 years. Again, I know you just answered this question, but how much time will she actually serve, for those of you asking that question again?
Yeah, I think she'll serve about, from my calculations, about 6 additional years from the time she's already served. So a total of about 8.5-ish, maybe 9 years on a 10-year sentence. She will get some good time credit as long as she maintains appropriate behavior in jail. It looks like Mr. Campbell handed up some certificates, so I guess she's been doing a decent job in terms of her jail behavior.
Yeah. She said she found God. I thought that was interesting. In jail.
Yes, and sometimes folks legitimately find God, and that's a driving force. She's got a long life ahead of her, and hopefully she can. There's no way she can ever repay anybody for her actions, but hopefully, and in fact this probably goes for everybody, hopefully she can find some kindness and some decency and move forward in her life, in a positive way. She's going to be unsupervised in Brazil. Who knows where she'll be mentally after these 6 years or so, but hopefully her finding God and her reflection on perhaps some religious basis will allow her to actually be kind and decent, because she has a long life to live.
Okay. We did hear from Juliana Perez-Magalhães up there. We'll get to some of what she said in just a moment, but she talked a lot about, she was crying the whole time. She said she was praying for forgiveness. She said she'll never forgive herself. Said she, is to blame truly for this. She also talked about how she found God. She said that she was remorseful of what happened. Do you think that had any impact at all on the decision that was made?
I think the facts were just too difficult to overcome. Like, as we talked about for the trial, you can only prepare a dish with the ingredients that you get.
Right.
And I think Mr. Campbell had some difficult ingredients. I think the judge had in mind, remember she sat through 3-4 weeks of this, plus all the pretrial hearings. She had in mind what she was going to do. I don't know if Ms. Magalhães' statement really was going to have any impact. It was certainly, because she didn't have to talk at all.
Right.
It was nice, the words that she said. Hopefully she follows through on them. None of us will ever know. She'll live a life in Brazil, hopefully that's kind and decent, versus what the judge saw today.
Yeah, and you mentioned Judge Ascarati and how she kind of already had a list ready to go. She had a list of all these different things. She talked about how she cannot accept the time served. She said you were not remorseful. I thought that was really pointed, and she's been very direct this whole time. She did not hold back on Juliana, even though Juliana was crying. She was straight up with her. She was like, listen, I am going to give you this sentence, and you should have known that this was not an agreement. This was a recommendation, and you can't stand here and say you deserve something else when you know what you did. Let's go back a little bit, though, to the victim impact statements. The first impact statement we heard was Deirdre Fisher, Joseph Ryan's mother. I'd love, if we can, to take a listen to her talking to Judge Ascarati and also the courtroom, but asking the judge to consider what was happening, talking about how she lost her rock.
And my cheerleader, that empathetic voice saying, "Mom, you got this. Mom, you should be kinder to yourself." I lost my rock.
Okay, so obviously a very emotional moment there. I know we have more of what Deirdre Fisher said during her victim impact statement. Again, for those of you just tuning in, Juliana Perez-Magalhães, the Banfield family au pair, who's accused of shooting and killing Joseph Ryan, alongside with Brendan Banfield, who was also accused of shooting and killing both Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. So the whole theory is that they worked together, came up with this elaborate plan. to kill Christine Banfield, and they were going to pin it on Joseph Ryan, kill Joseph Ryan and pin it on him. Obviously, that plan backfired for them. Brendan Banfield expected to serve a life sentence, the mandatory life sentence, and Juliana Perez Magalhães now will serve 10 years, approximately 6 or 7 more years left on that serving or time she'll have to serve, but a total of 10 years. And that is not what she thought she was going to get when she agreed to testify against Brendan Banfield. So let's go back again. We want to focus a lot more on the victims here. There are 2 victims, Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield. I will mention that, Christine Banfield's family was in the courtroom. However, they were not allowed to give a victim impact statement because Juliana is not charged with killing Christine Banfield. We heard the judge say that at the very beginning because, there was interest from the family. They did want to give victim impact statements. You see Christine there on your screen, but they were not allowed because, again, Juliana is not charged in connection to Christine's death specifically. Although we heard Judge Oscarati say, you were still a part of this plan. You still got a good deal. You could have been sentenced to life here. You are still getting a deal even with 10 years. So let's play another clip if we can from when Deirdre Fisher gave her victim impact statement, and she was talking about how her son was not disposable, and she said that multiple times. So if we can, let's take a listen to one of those.
My son, Joseph Nathan Ryan, was not and is not disposable.
Okay, so I do think we have a little bit more that we could play from her. Let's see if we can play where she's talking about who Joseph Ryan was. He wasn't just some, again, disposable person. He was also a son and a grandson. Again, this was her plea to Judge Oscarati right before that sentencing was handed down.
Judge will say Joe meant more than nothing, that he was someone worthy of dignity and life, who didn't deserve to be used and thrown away.
Okay, so again, Deirdre Fisher, she was up there for about, 15, 20 minutes?
Right.
And she was very emotional. It was very hard to listen to her. She is a heartbroken mother. A little about Joseph Ryan, for those of you who maybe didn't know much about him. We did have the opportunity to go down and speak with her at her home in Florida and talk to her at length about her son, Joseph Ryan. He was born 2 days before Christmas. When I was there with her at her home, she mentioned the Christmas tree that she has next to his ashes in her home, and she showed me that Christmas tree. She lights it every morning and she says good morning to her son. His ashes are there on the dresser right there, and she said it is so hard for her to do that, but that's her way of feeling connected to her son. She told me that, he was her best friend. He was her rock. They were very close. While they did not live together at this point, he lived up here in Northern Virginia, they were very close. She said they talked on the phone nearly every day. We also, though, heard from Joseph Ryan's aunt, who I believe he lived with family and she was there quite often. If we have any of the clips from her, I would love to play that. It does not look like, okay, we do have some clips from the aunt, so let's take a listen to what the aunt said.
He is my beloved nephew and a son and grandson to his loving family. Pardon me 1 second. Joe did not just die on February 23rd, 23. He was murdered over and over again, every time lies were spoken. This could have been a very different ending where Juliana saved 2 lives, but that's not. At least she should have done the job for which she was being paid to protect a child. She did not. So many opportunities to do the right thing.
Okay, so again, that was Joseph Ryan's aunt speaking there. So we heard from both Deirdre Fisher, Joseph Ryan's mother, and his aunt there, and both were incredibly emotional. We did see the camera cut to Juliana multiple times, and the whole time she was crying. Do you think those were genuine tears? I know you're not a body language expert, but did those look genuine to you in any capacity?
I think they look genuine. You never know exactly why someone's emotional. Could be emotional about what was about to happen to her versus what happened to Mr. Ryan and Miss Banfield. Could have been that. But like we talked about, I mean, the judge was very well prepared, and that's what you want in a judge. You want a judge that has read everything and has something in mind. You don't want a judge that's just flying by the seat of her pants or saying to the clerk, hand me the file. I have no idea what's happening here, but I'll need to look at the file. And I think what the aunt said was also reflected in the judge's comments, that you could have prevented this. She was brought here and was working to take care of the child. And that, to say it was an abdication of her duty, is certainly the understatement of the year, because the child was literally in the house in the basement when everything happened. So it was, you and I both watched both those victim impact segments, and they were real emotional and they were real difficult to see. I mean, so the lack of humanity, I think, all around is just is tough to fathom.
Yeah, and I think both of them mentioned how Joseph Ryan wasn't just killed on February 24th, 2023. They said he was murdered again each time a lie was said about him. We heard so many horrible things said about Joseph Ryan since day one of when this happened. He was painted as this monster, if you will. And, you know, we've now learned that he was being set up. This was a setup, according to the court and this conviction of Brendan Banfield. And now what we saw from Judge Ascarati, somebody did ask, and let's get to some questions. If you do have a question for Frank, you can text us at 202-895-5599. Again, 202-895-5599 if you have questions. Somebody asked, why did the judge say that her testifying, so Juliana testifying, was not a mitigated factor for her sentencing?
I think what the judge was trying to say there was that she already received the benefit of the deal by not getting potentially a life sentence. So she's already received a huge benefit to, say, go from life down to a maximum of 10 years. So the fact that she testified, that was really taken into account in the reduction of the charge versus what she actually said during the trial. So essentially Judge Ascarati was saying, listen, you already got the benefit of a great deal. I'm not going to give you any additional benefit for testifying because of the windfall that you got in terms of the deal that was reached.
Okay. Somebody else asked, is it possible for her to be let out with probation?
It's impossible for her to be let out with probation before she finishes her time.
Right.
And once she finishes her time, probation is a nullity. It's not going to happen because she's going to get deported.
Okay. And for those of you, again, who have been with us from the start, or for those of you just tuning in, Juliana Perez-Magalhães was sentenced today to 10 years, but she already has served 2 or 3 years here. So she'll probably have about 6 or 7 more years to serve and then would likely be deported back to Brazil. All right. So Matthew Torres, our reporter, has been in the courtroom through this entire trial for Brendan Banfield, but was also there this morning for sentencing. Would love to talk to Matt if we're able to get to him right now. Matt, you know, we saw a lot of emotion on our ends, but what were you seeing that we weren't able to see? I know Christine Banfield's family was not shown on camera. How were they reacting to this?
As you might imagine, they were very emotional about this, especially when we heard from Joe Ryan's aunt on the stand. When she got off the stand and went back to her seat, I noticed Christine Banfield's sister turning around, grabbing her hand and saying thank you. And as soon as we found out that Juliana Perez-Magalhães was being sentenced to 10 years, when everyone was leaving the courtroom, both of those families, Joe Ryan's and Christine Banfield's families, just started hugging each other. You can tell just how much weight this has really put on them, the amount of stress, and having that relief. I noticed that the aunt of Joe Ryan kept looking to Joe Ryan's 81-year-old grandmother, who she referenced during her victim impact statement. And she could already tell where the judge was going when she started mentioning, while yes, they acknowledged that because of Juliana's testimony that they were able to get that guilty verdict against Brendan Banfield, but then she went through a litany of reasons why she feels she deserved the maximum sentence under manslaughter. The family members really started looking at each other. You could tell they're like, all right, this is really going to our favor. But we also saw just people around the courtroom as well. You never know exactly where the judge was going. but just based off of her statements from the beginning there, knowing that she was going to hand down the maximum sentence allowed with this, it was really telling. It was really emotional. Even when Deirdre, Joe Ryan's mother, was giving her video testimony, the family members that were in there on behalf of Joe Ryan also started to get emotional. They also started leaning on each other, putting their hands on each other's shoulders to provide comfort. This was a heavy moment during that time, but you can really see the amount of support, not only within Joseph Ryan's family, but the support that's being shared with Christine Banfield's family. You could tell just how much closer that they've gotten through this legal journey, but they know for a fact that they won't be able to get their loved ones. Just to see that Juliana Perez Magalhães is not just going to serve the time served under this recommendation, but the 10 years. It's compelling and certainly sends a message even to John Carroll, the defense attorney who was briefly in the courtroom.
And Matthew, I know, we've watched this so closely, right? And we've seen so much emotion through this all. I think what was really surprising, or maybe not surprising, because Judge Ascarati has been so to the point up until this point, were you surprised? What was the reaction when she said, no, I'm giving you the 10 years?
I think there was a level of people who were not surprised. I was able to speak with the defense attorney, Ryan Campbell, out in the hallways. We asked him, what was your reaction? Were you surprised? He says he was not surprised at all by the judge's decision. So that tells you something right there. But of course, he was going to argue to the very last moment there that without Juliana's testimony, without her cooperation at some point, even if that may be a year and a half later, that we wouldn't have gotten to the guilty verdicts that Brendan Banfield is facing. But the fact that she gave out all those lists, from having a loaded gun in her pocket, from bringing the child down to the basement as these murders were about to take place, calling 911 and then hanging up. That part, when you look around, everyone kind of got the sense where the judge was heading. But speaking to Ryan Campbell outside, he says, look, of course he gives sympathies to the families of Christine Banfield and Joe Ryan, but he just says without her, it was apparent that we may have not gotten this conviction for Brendan Banfield. So I'm sure there's a lot of mixed emotions, especially with what Juliana was facing, as she did apologize and at least say on this there that she took responsibility. We are waiting to see if at least Joe Ryan's family may be coming out. There's a likelihood that they may not be speaking. We're set up for a press conference here. Christine Banfield's family has not spoken up about this outside of the statement that they gave to me this week. They're not planning to provide any more comments after this. There is a child custody battle that is now brewing and taking place within this. So I think out of just precaution and just to avoid anything that could hamper this civil case, they're choosing not to offer any comments. But Katie, if I could just add some more comments as far as what Ryan Campbell, the defense attorney, said. We understand that Juliana has been here on a visa, and so I asked him, what does that look like as far as the immigration case, potential deportation? He did say that as far as DHS, there's been no retainers. However, there has been a request for this, but he is anticipating if she were to be taken back to Brazil, that it would be after she serves this sentence, even though that she could be removed, there is still legal proceedings before that even happens. So whether that be during her time served in prison, or whether or not that's after she is released from prison, it's still unclear. But we know within the next few months or weeks or so, she will be transferred to a facility here in Virginia. So that is what Ryan Campbell told us soon after this sentencing.
All right, thank you, Matthew. And I know there's probably a lot going on outside of the courtroom, so we do want to let you get back to getting over and seeing if any family members do want to speak with us. Thank you so much, Matthew. Matthew has been in the courtroom since day one of this trial, and he's been watching these families. He's been kind of there in person, which is an added element, right? Because we're watching it through a screen, but he's watching it in person. And these are emotional moments. It's just been a tough situation for so many people, and our hearts go out to the families of both of these victims. We heard him talking quite a bit about Christine Banfield's family, and let's talk about how they were not allowed to give a victim impact statement. I understand what the judge said. She said that Christine was not the victim of Juliana per se, but then at the end she kind of implied Christine was a victim of Juliana's in some capacity. Why was the decision made to not allow victim impact?
Yeah, there's a particular statute or law on that, and I think what Mr. Campbell brought up, and I don't want to lose sight of, his only duty here is to his client. And the deal that he reached, even though I'm sure he's disappointed with the maximum sentence of 10 years, is still a pretty darn good deal for her. She avoided a potential life sentence given the verdict against Mr. Banfield. And for her to come out of this thing after shooting someone with a 10-year sentence, I have to commend him for the deal that he reached. But he did a legal objection to bringing out any of those victim impact statements with regard to Ms. Banfield, but that's based upon a particular Virginia law, which really limits the victim impact statements to the named or actual victim in the case. I think that's the law that he cited, and the judge went along with that, but still that doesn't mean she can close her eyes to the ramifications to both Christine and obviously to Joseph Ryan.
Okay, another question from someone, can she appeal the sentence or does the plea guarantee the sentence?
There's really no basis for an appeal there. Anybody can sue anybody for anything or appeal for any reason ever, right? So the door is never closed to that. But unless the judge gave an illegal sentence, which would be a sentence over 10 years, so if the judge came out and said, you know what, manslaughter is not good enough, I'm going to give you 17 years in jail instead of 10, then he could appeal that. Or if there was an unconstitutional basis for the sentence, if she said, I'm going to sentence you based upon your gender or your race or something like that, then that could be a basis for appeal. But the sentence she pronounced was clearly within the maximum, even though it was right at the line of the maximum, so there's really no basis for an appeal.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Frank Salvedo. He has been with us throughout the entire trial for Brendan Banfield and Juliana Perez-Magalhães. He's going to be sticking around with us for a little bit longer, and he'll be taking your questions. So feel free to send us questions if you have them. 202-895-5599. I see more questions coming in. We will be getting to those shortly, but I do, for those of you who may have missed what unfolded this morning, Juliana Perez-Magalhães sentenced 10 years. She will be able to probably be released within 6 or 7 years, then would likely be deported back to Brazil. But this is not the agreement, if you will, that she thought she had agreed to. This was the recommendation, was that she would get time served, but that is not an agreement, and the judge made that clear. Not only was it not an agreement, but it is not what she was going to hand down to her because she didn't think that was fair. Victim impact statements happened before that decision was made. We heard from both Joseph Ryan's mother and his aunt. We're going to play for you those victim impact statements so you can kind of get an idea of what unfolded before that sentence was handed down.
Judge Penny Ascarati for giving me the opportunity to talk about the impact of the murder of my son, Joseph Nathan Ryan. My baby boy was born 2 days before Christmas, making that our special holiday. His middle name was Nathan, which means gift. Since Joe's murder, I haven't been able to take down my little Christmas tree, which sits behind the urn with his ashes. I say good morning to him each day when I turn on the tree's lights. But of course, that's not Joe sitting there. He can't say, I love you back. When Joe was taken from me cruelly and callously, murdered by Juliana and Brendan on February 24th, 2023, I lost so very much, more than I can possibly name. I lost my confidant, someone who knew me deeply, listened without judgment, offered advice with my best interests at heart. I lost my biggest ally and my cheerleader. That empathetic voice saying, "Mom, you got this. Mom, you should be kinder to yourself." I lost my rock and protector. The person who flew down repeatedly to take care of me when I had cancer. I lost the comfort of knowing that my son would be there to care for me when I'm an old woman with illness or dementia, just as he cared for his grandmother and grandfather. I lost my financial sustainability due to grief's torturous effect on my health, both physically and mentally, which has affected my ability to work and function. I lost my peace and sense of well-being. I can never unhear Joe's moans and cries after he was shot, the cries of a dying man. I can never unsee the image of his lifeless, bloody hand from the trial images. I lost nearly all my friends who couldn't handle dealing with someone lost in grief or understand why my life can't just go on. I lost the chance to ever be called Grandma. I will never have that. I lost the sound of Joe calling me the most beautiful word in the world, Mom. I lost my Christmas baby, Joseph Nathan, my greatest gift. The impact of Joe's loss doesn't go away. Will never go away, but only grow. So many tears, so many times reaching for the phone to call him, only to remember that he won't and can't pick up. So many times hearing the phone ring and wishing it was him, calling me out of the blue about something happening in the world or in his life. So many empty Christmases and so many birthdays without him singing to me in his awful yet beautiful voice, tone deaf. So many moments of trying to remember the exact sound of his laughter and fearing that someday I won't. So many sleepless nights. So many nightmares of his brutal murder and fear, confusion, and of the pain he must have felt. So many screams and guttural cries into my pillow, feeling the loss of my son. So many moments of reading horrible things online, lies told about who Joe wasn't. So many moments defending and explaining who my son was and why he couldn't have committed the murder of Christine Banfield. God rest her soul. So many conversations with others, draining them and me of a chance to make happier memories together. So many stomach aches. So many doctor's appointments, hospital bills, feelings of shame about my health. So many times wishing I could tell Joe about another milestone in my weight loss journey, seeking better health, knowing how encouraging and proud he would be. So many lost moments, so many moments of loss. My son's life was used and thrown away, seen as worthless and utterly disposable. Disposal by those who plotted and executed his brutal murder. Do I think or dare hope that there will be justice for Joe's death? For my loss as his mother? I don't believe that's possible. What I do hope is that, even for a moment, that the world and you, Judge, will say Joe meant more than nothing, that he was someone worthy of dignity and life, who didn't deserve to be used and thrown away, treated as utterly disposable. Thank you for listening and for weighing the trail of pain and loss Juliana left in the wake of her calculated, cold-blooded murder, with her life and future as her only concern. My son, Joseph Nathan Ryan, was not and is not disposable. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Please answer any questions that Mr. Campbell may have.
All right, cross-examination? No cross-examination. Okay, thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case under penalty of law? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name for the court?
Sangita Ryan.
And can you describe your relationship to Joe Ryan?
Is this where I read my statement? Who I met, Joey Nathan Ryan, was my nephew, and Honorable Judge Ascarati. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you for allowing the Ryan family to speak up for our Joey Nathan Ryan. We thank the jury for helping us achieve justice for Joe and Christine. And we thank the Fairfax County Police Department, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and all that helped, and we are grateful for justice. So our family has remained silent since the devastating loss out of grief, but also out of respect for the justice system. For us, Joe did not just die on February 23rd, 23. He was murdered over and over again, every time lies were spoken, every time his picture was posted alongside salacious stories told by two wolves in sheep's clothing who perpetrated this crime and attempted to destroy the memory of two remarkable people. Julia and her boss/lover intended to snuff out the life of two innocent victims who deserve to live full and meaningful lives of their own. Well, while we acknowledge the defendant for eventually coming forward with the truth, telling the truth doesn't absolve her of responsibility. Honesty is something we're taught at a young age. Telling the truth doesn't erase the harm. It simply allows others to move forward. It doesn't bring Joe back, and it sure doesn't bring Christine back. Hearing the truth has finally allowed us to exhale. It validated to the world what we already knew, that Joe was not the monster he was portrayed to be. Rather, Joe was an elder brother, a brand new uncle, the eldest cousin and confidant to four. He is my beloved nephew, and a son and grandson to his loving family. Pardon me 1 second. We acknowledge that Juliana was a young woman in a foreign country, in love with her employer in a situation where the power imbalance was not in her favor. But where our compassion ends is with the one other responsibility. Juliana was entrusted with and received payment for the care and protection of a small, innocent child. And Juliana, I feel, failed Valerie repeatedly. She was trusted to protect this young charge, but instead chose to cause irreparable damage. She robbed her of her mother. She stole childhood memories. She chose to partner in the brutal assassination of her mother's character, as well as her beautiful being. The defendant and her boss/boyfriend convinced Valerie that a stranger broke into her home and killed her mother, when in fact the monsters were the very people who cared for her after the loss. Juliana and her boss worked to erase her mother's existence and credibility and place the blame on an innocent man. Our hearts go out to all of Christine and Valerie's family. What an absolutely incredible person she must have been. But may I tell you about Joe? Joe is loved. Joe came to live with the Ryan family. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Take your time.
Joe came to live with the Ryan family just days after his birth. His birth parents, Dad, Sean, and Deirdre, who you met, were teenagers, so Joe lived with and was raised by his paternal grandparents, Connie and Jim, for all of his life. As a young child, Joe, who we call Joey, was fun-loving and loved from the beginning. He was inquisitive, curious, smart, charming, and so dang talkative. Joe approached strangers and passerbyers with random and nerdy questions about Transformers and movie characters and the Legend of Zelda video game characters and who would win in a battle between this person, and he respectfully waited the answers, whether you knew him or not. As he grew into adulthood, Joe's hobbies included building or painting anything that used his fine motor skills. He loved martial arts. He had a great love and respect for our environment, animals, especially mistreated, neglected, and ugly dogs. And he rescued many injured and less loved dogs, bringing them across the country in his travels safely home to the home he shared with his grandmother. Joe cared for people, he cared for animals, and Joe didn't hurt people. When Joe's grandfather, Pap, required care due to a debilitating stroke, Joe left his life in Virginia and moved to Florida to serve as the full-time caregiver to his grandfather, the grandfather that supported him from infancy. When Pap developed dementia and had to move into a memory care facility, then Joe moved back to Virginia, where he began to take care of his grandmother, who had begun to experience health problems of her own. Joe took over transportation for medical appointments, hospital procedures, food shopping, and the bond between Connie and her grandson was as close as that of a mother and child. Joe would never have put himself in a dangerous situation that would risk his ability to continue to take care of his beloved grandmother or his old ugly dog, Kitty. I'm sorry, she's not ugly. When Joe didn't come home, Joe's grandmother, Connie, lost the gentleman that she and Pap raised as their fourth son. Joe's sudden murder devastated his grandma, who was 81, and devastated her so much she could no longer live in the family home without Joe, and quietly and quickly sold her home to dodge memories, grief, and reporters to move closer to my husband and me. My husband is Joe's Uncle Jimmy, and I'm his Aunt Gita. In Joe's absence, my husband and I made the decision to leave our careers and to take over his grandma's support and care team. We continue to do that today, and we think about and talk about Joe every single day. Honorable Judge Asgarati, we feel Joe and Christine were targeted by the worst kind of monsters, the kind who live among the victims and wait until they're the most vulnerable. We feel as a woman, a caretaker, and as a daughter, Juliana had opportunity to stop this brutal assassination. We think she could have warned Christine. We think she could have warned Joe that morning. This could have been a very different ending where Juliana saved 2 lives. But that's not. At least she should have done the job for which she was being paid, to protect a child. She did not. So many opportunities to do the right thing, and Juliana over and over chose not to. And while we acknowledge that she found the strength to tell the truth, it doesn't absolve the responsibility. So today we leave here finally standing as Joe's family. This nightmare's ending. It's our hope that Juliana doesn't walk free, but continues to reflect on how she became capable of doing this, so that when she does return to Brazil, she never victimizes another person, never betrays another child in her care, and never again places selfish desire above human life. She doesn't deserve to profit. We hope that can be enforced. The reality is, though, she will be free one day, and our hope is that she carries the weight of the lives destroyed, that Juliana chooses to live as a decent person, and that she is truly remorseful. The sentence that Juliana receives today is not the only one given. We all carry a life sentence of grief, even after hers ends. We ask for peace. We ask to be allowed to move forward. Today we move forward by returning Joe's kindness to the world. We say his name proudly. We invite the world to finally know the man we protected in silence for so long. He is loved. We miss Joe, and our family is devastated by the way he was ripped from our lives. Joe won't complete painting his unfinished Warhammer 3D figurines. He won't compete in any more live-action role-playing battles with silly, hand-created foam weapons, nor his mixed martial arts or video game battles. He'll no longer bore us with lectures about eating organic food over junk food, but it's with our hearts we thank you, Honorable Judge, and the jury that was here, members of the court, the police, the detective, the prosecution team, the victims team, and all the witnesses who supported justice for Joe. Thank you so much for listening.
Please answer any questions that Mr. Campbell might have.
Any cross-examination?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, no questions. All right, you can
Thank
go
you
back
so
to your
much.
seat. Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
All right, thank you so much for those of you who've been sticking with us here on WUSA 9+. You have been watching the sentencing hearing for Juliana Perez Magalhães. I'm Katie Lusso, and this is Frank Salvedo, our criminal defense attorney, legal expert. Frank, we have received so many questions, but let's start with the basics. Juliana was sentenced to 10 years by Judge Penny Ascarati. This was the max sentence she could get with that plea agreement, where she accepted that agreement with a manslaughter charge. How long will she actually serve?
She'll serve about 8.5 to 9 years of the 10-year sentence. She's already been in jail for about 3 years. So by my calculations, she has about 6 years left to go, assuming she behaves while she's in jail.
Okay, I know some of you have been sending us questions, so let's get straight to those questions for the next few minutes. Somebody asked, is it possible for her to be let out on probation at any point through this process?
It's impossible for that to happen. The best she could hope for is perhaps she gets deported before she ends up serving her sentence. But typically, the system requires you to do your sentence before you get deported. Otherwise, that would give kind of free rein for people to do whatever they wanted, and if they knew they were just going to be deported back to their home country.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people have been asking about that aspect of the deportation. When would that happen? She will serve out this sentence in the United States, and then the deportation would happen, correct?
That is correct. There are rare circumstances where the United States does have agreements with other countries where there could be a transfer from one country to another and serve the rest of the sentence there, which is usually a lesser sentence, or you're released to home arrest or house detention, home detention. I don't see that happening in this case. I don't know if these two countries have an agreement, but I wouldn't think that the U.S. Or the Commonwealth of Virginia would agree to release her in any way, shape, or form until she finishes her sentence.
Okay. And you know, Frank, we have heard Juliana testify during the trial for Brendan Banfield. We also heard her today. Somebody asked if there is a way that Juliana would still be able to get money from movies or books. We heard her testifying that Netflix and other producers, production companies had reached out to her. She testified that she felt like she deserved that because of everything she's been through. That was a big point of contention through Brendan Banfield's trial. We didn't really hear that come up per se today, but the judge kind of alluded to some of her behavioral choices during the trial. Is there a situation where the judge can say you can't do that, or if you do get money for these things, you have to hand it over to the victims' families?
Yeah, the judge doesn't normally wade into that type of situation. It didn't seem like from her plea agreement or the judge's pronouncement of sentence that she is prohibited from getting any kind of monetary judgment. There are court costs, there are expenses that are probably going to be attributed to her behavior. Anything that she gets within the time that she's incarcerated would likely go towards those expenses. But there's nothing that I can see that would prevent her in 6 years going to Brazil and perhaps selling her story to gain some kind of monetary achievement. That's a whole different world. It is probably governed by laws in Brazil. So I would expect that she would be able to get some monetary compensation for her story, but really her story is already out there. So I don't know how much it's worth for any news outlet to buy an inside story, because everything's really been put out in the public already.
All right, thank you so much, Frank Salvedo. You've been with us since day one, and we appreciate you so much. I do want to mention before we go that I was able to speak with Joseph Ryan's mother, Deirdre Fisher, just moments ago. A very emotional conversation. She is obviously breathing a huge sigh of relief right now with that sentence being handed down. We are going to have more of that conversation on the news at 4 on WUSA 9. Thanks so much for watching.